Hey guys, this is the video for week 8 of our distance learning. So going over here to the calendar view, this is the week from May 11th through the 15th, and all the assignments will be due on Monday the 18th. Both assignments, I should say. There's two. So I'll look at these really quickly. The first one should be pretty familiar by now. It's the independent novel questions, or it seems like most of you are doing the short story option, since only a small number of you requested novels from me, and that's fine. But just to say that if you're not reading a novel, you can answer the questions using the story I provided for this week. Sorry. So you can click here to get the PDF of the story, and then you can go ahead and answer the questions. And I think they're pretty straightforward. What do you think of the future world in your novel? And I have some kind of extended questions there if you need a little bit of guidance. Like, are there things that are improvements that the author has imagined? So usually, especially in the dystopian genre, there are things that, as I discussed before, have gone very badly, but there are usually also at least some positive changes as well. So you can just kind of, again, discuss what you think of either the good or the bad or both. Next one, and again, this is in both the story for sure, but also pretty much any dystopian novel. What kind of social issue is being addressed here? So a lot of times it might be the role of the government and the government interfering in people's lives and either surveillance or controlling what people can do or censoring things that people create. So those are just a few examples that are pretty common in the genre. And then finally, how do you think the novel relates to the world today? So again, for the most part, these novels tend to be set in the future, or at least were set in the future when the author wrote them. Some of the classic dystopian texts, like the most obvious example here would be 1984, which was written in 1948. And so at the time, being set in 1984 was the future. But obviously I was barely even born. I was a baby in 1984, and probably some of your parents were too. So it is our past at this point. So putting that aside, when the authors write them, whether they're current authors writing today or authors writing back in the 30s or 40s, like Aldous Huxley and George Orwell, they were probably inspired by things that were going on at the time. And a lot of times it might be an author thinking about, well, if we continue going down this path, this is what it could lead to. So if you feel like there is relevance to the world today, what do you think that is? And so again, pretty much, I mean, obviously you're looking at what the author was trying to say, but it's your interpretation as well. Okay, so we've gone through that pretty thoroughly. And now, as I mentioned last week, got a little bit more grammar practice. And so again, according to Canvas, it's a quiz, but just because the quiz function in Canvas is the way that I can give you the different types of questions besides just typing in a box. That's a regular assignment. You can type in a box, or you can attach a Google Doc. This way I can give you the multiple choice questions and everything. So I'll show you the practice here and walk you through a few of them if you want to follow along. Or I'll try to anyway. And there's a few slightly different types of questions. So I have, and you should be able to see this as you go, but I have the sort of instructions for I guess it's 4 different types of questions that are on here. So the first one here, you're going to be looking at the italicized phrase, so about racism, and you're going to need to figure out, and we've gone over these before way back in the fall, whether it's an adjective phrase or an adverb phrase. So what is it describing? What is it modifying? And if it's modifying a noun, then that would make it an adjective phrase because adjectives describe nouns and pronouns. And if it's describing pretty much anything else, the most obvious thing with an adverb phrase would be the verb in the sentence. But also, if you might remember, hopefully, adverbs can also modify adjectives. So if you say it's very hot outside, the word hot is describing the temperature outside, but the word very, which is an adverb, is modifying how hot it is. So you might say the cake is slightly hot still. That would be an example of another adverb that would describe the degree to which that item is hot. And also, adverbs can do the same thing to other adverbs. So again, using the saddest, most basic adverb possible, very, again, just because it's so handy, which is also why it doesn't have the best meaning. But you could say that John was running very quickly down the street, and it's describing just how quickly he was running. So the quickly describes the running, and then the very quickly modifies there. So in this case, about racism is describing the statements that he made, and statements are a noun. So this one would be an adjective. And let's look at another one. Okay, so here's one. Don't look behind that door. So behind that door is telling you where to look, or in this case, where not to look. Don't know what's back there. But so if you don't look behind that door, it's telling you, like I said, it's describing the looking. It's not describing you, who is the subject of the sentence. It's one of these where it's an imperative sentence, so the subject isn't directly stated, but it's implied. They're telling you, don't look behind that door. It's not describing you. You're not behind that door, at least not if you're listening to the speaker here. So it's describing the looking and where you should or shouldn't be looking. And so it's an adverb. And we'll do one more of these. Okay, the first island beyond the breakers has a wonderful beach. So in this case, it's describing the island by telling us where the island is or which island we're talking about. So it's an adjective. Okay, so I'm going to go back up here to the instructions, and let's look at the instructions for the next set. So for number 11 through 20, okay, so it looks like we're just modifying. We're continuing on this. We're going to describe whether it's an adjective or adverb, and then we'll also, let's see, identify the preposition and the object of the preposition. And keep an eye here on the fact that it says it's one noun, but it may be more than one word if it's a proper noun. And I'm pretty sure the first one, or maybe not the first one, but there's definitely one that is an example there. So let's look at this first one. So the prepositional phrase here is of New Mexico. Okay, so this one is a little bit more challenging because they're not italicizing them for us. But there's only going to be one. And when we're talking about prepositional phrases, the important thing to keep in mind is that because of the fact that they're prepositional phrases, it's always going to describe one thing or one action or something. It doesn't have to be an adjective because they can also be adverbs, but it's describing something in the most general sense in relation to something else. So again, if I say the book is under the table, under the table is the prepositional phrase. Under is the preposition that's giving us the, in this case, literally the position of the book relative to the table. So the table is what we would call the object of the preposition. So in this case, our preposition is of New Mexico. And of New Mexico is describing the capital, right? So that would make it an adjective since the capital is a noun. And I can follow my own directions. Okay, so the preposition is of, and then the object is New Mexico. So yes, this is one of those examples there where it's one noun. New Mexico is one place, one state, but it's two words since it's a proper noun. Okay, let's see. I think that one's already in the example there. Okay, several friends and I correspond by email, Morgan said. So the phrase here is by email, and by email is describing how they correspond, right? It's not describing her friends. Her friends aren't by email. They're not like physically in her inbox, and neither is Morgan. I guess Morgan could be a gentleman. I don't know Morgan's gender. But anyway, so by email is describing how they correspond. So that's going to be an adverb. The preposition is by, and email is the object. So again, this is just a smidge more difficulty on top of what we were doing there, but same idea. Just this time we have to find. Okay, the president of the corporation was once the company's secretary. So our prepositional phrase here is of the corporation, and that is describing the president. So it's going to be an adjective. Preposition is of, and the object is corporation. Okay, let's look at the next set. So these next ones are describing participles and participle phrases. And let me scroll back up to the exact directions, make sure I am following them myself. Okay, so we're going to identify the noun that is being described by the participle or participle phrase. And then I guess we're just typing it in the box, it looks like. Okay, so watching them warily, the bobcat moved softly across the field. So it's the bobcat that's watching them warily. Lorraine Hansberry is the one who is writing. I'm the one that was reviewing my notes. So hopefully these will come relatively naturally to you. Just looking for what's being described. Okay, and then finally, in the last set, we're looking for the participle phrase and then identifying the noun. So let's take a look at those. So kind of like with the second set, it's similar to that first set, to the set that came before it, but it's just adding just a smidge more difficulty to the task. So I won't do 31 since that's up in the instructions. Okay. So, left for too long, they began to climb out of their box. So, left for too long is the participle phrase, and it's modifying they, which in this case I think is the puppies from up here. Poor little puppies. Knowing the meaning of clouds, my grandfather accurately predicts the weather. So, knowing the meanings of clouds. And it's modifying the grandfather. All right, so hopefully this isn't too difficult. And if you do have any questions, let me know. I know that some of this grammar can be a little fussy and a little confusing. Just don't stress too much. It's a participation grade, so I don't want you to be overwhelmed by it. But it's some good practice. And before we go on break, it's nice to kind of refresh some of this so it won't be so foreign in the fall when we start back again. All right, so that should do it for this week's assignments. And like I said, let me know if you have any questions. You can reach me by phone or by email. And I also have video tutorials at the same time as usual, which, if I remember correctly, that'll go over here to make sure, are Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday morning, if I'm not mistaken. But I'll confirm that. Yes, Tuesday at 3 and Wednesday at 10. All right, I hope y'all are staying safe and healthy and making good choices out there. I'm here for you if you need me. Bye.